My DIL broke my jaw. My daughter-in-law laughed and said, "Now you know how to serve, Mom." About the house. I set down the shirt I was folding, one of Richard's favorites, blue cotton with pearl buttons. He wore it the day he taught me to read our first oil lease agreement. Have you ever had someone look at you like you're already dead? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. I never thought I'd spend my 70s with my jaw wired shut, sipping soup through a straw, while the girl who married my son strutted through my kitchen like she owned it. One moment, I was folding laundry in my own home, the next, my daughter-in-law shoved me so hard I hit the corner of the counter. My jaw cracked. And when I looked up, she didn't flinch, she laughed. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you welcomed into your family? Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Has someone ever treated you like you don't matter because of your age? I know some of you have been there. This isn't just family drama, it's about survival, dignity, and the kind of revenge that comes wrapped in legal papers. What she didn't know was that the house she coveted wasn't just bricks and walls, it sat on 5 acres outside Fort Worth, with oil rights tucked into a trust one set up back when my late husband was alive. Stay with me, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about family loyalty. If you've ever felt underestimated because of your age, this story will remind you that wisdom beats youth every single time. Let me take you back to that sweltering July morning when my quiet life became a battlefield. Have you ever had someone look at you like you're already dead? That's exactly how my daughter-in-law looked at me right before she changed my life forever. It was Tuesday morning, July 15th, and the Texas heat was already pressing against my kitchen windows like an unwelcome visitor. I'd been up since 5:30, same as every day for the past 40 years. Coffee first, then the laundry. Routine kept me sane after Richard passed. The laundry basket felt heavier these days. 73 years old, and my hands weren't what they used to be. But I managed. I always managed. That's what women like me do, we carry the weight until someone notices we're still standing. Amanda's heels clicked across my hardwood floors before I saw her face. Click, click, click. Like a countdown to something terrible. She moved through my house with that confident stride she'd perfected over the 8 years she'd been married to my son. Not the grateful walk of someone visiting family. The possessive stride of someone who thought she already owned the place. "Morning, Mom," she said, but her voice carried that fake sweetness she used when she wanted something. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, and she wore that designer dress, the navy one with the white trim that probably cost more than my grocery budget for 3 months. I nodded, focusing on folding Richard's old work shirts. I couldn't bring myself to donate them yet. They still smelled like his cologne if I buried my face deep enough in the fabric. "We need to talk," Amanda said, settling herself at my kitchen table like she was holding court. She spread some papers across the oak surface, the table Richard built with his own hands during our first year in this house. "About what, dear?" I kept my voice steady, but something cold was crawling up my spine. "About this house. About your situation." She gestured around my kitchen like it was a problem to be solved. "You're getting older, Mom. Last week you forgot to turn off the stove. What if something happens?" I hadn't forgotten to turn off anything. That was her lie, told to my son to make him worry. But I stayed quiet. Sometimes staying quiet tells you more about a person than speaking up ever could. "I've been thinking," Amanda continued, tapping her manicured nails against the table. "Maybe it's time to consider options." Options. The word hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. I set down the shirt I was folding, one of Richard's favorites, blue cotton with pearl buttons. He wore it the day he taught me to read our first oil lease agreement. His breath had been warm on my neck as he guided my finger along the important clauses, explaining how mineral rights worked, how we'd be protected no matter what happened to the surface land. "What kind of options?" I asked. Amanda's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Well, there are some lovely assisted living facilities in town. Places where you'd have people to take care of you. And this house. She paused, letting her eyes wander over my kitchen walls, my grandmother's china cabinet, the family photos spanning 5 decades. This house is too much for one person. Too much. As if 43 years of marriage, 2 children raised, Sunday dinners for grandkids, and every Christmas morning since 1981 were just too much for someone like me to handle. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not fear. I'd lived through too much to be afraid of a spoiled woman in an expensive dress. It was recognition. The same feeling I'd had back in Birmingham when white women looked at me like I didn't belong in the same grocery store as them. The same look I'd gotten when I married Richard, a white man, and people thought I was reaching above my place. And where would I go? I asked, my voice still calm. Like I said, there are facilities. Nice ones. You'd have your own room, activities, other people your age to talk to. Amanda's voice was getting more excited, like she was describing a vacation instead of the end of my independence. I picked up another shirt, this one green with tiny checks. Richard wore it to church every 3rd Sunday. The fabric was soft from years of washing, and I remembered how it felt under my palms when I'd smooth out the wrinkles across his broad shoulders. Those shoulders had carried oil equipment for 30 years. Those hands had built this house, room by room, nail by nail. Those arms had held me through miscarriages, racial slurs from neighbors, the death of his parents, and finally, his own death from cancer 3 years ago. Have you talked to David about this? I asked, mentioning my son. Amanda's smile faltered for just a second. Of course. He's concerned about you too. We both are. Lies came so easy to her. Like breathing. I folded the green shirt and placed it gently in the basket. Then I looked directly at Amanda for the first time since she'd walked into my kitchen. I appreciate your concern, I said. But I'm fine right where I am. Her face changed. The fake sweetness disappeared, replaced by something harder. Something hungry. Mom, you're being stubborn. This isn't really a request. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about my safety or my age or my well-being. This was about 5 acres of Texas land, a house with no mortgage, and whatever else Amanda thought she could get her hands on. I reached for the next shirt in the basket, but Amanda stood up fast, her chair scraping against the floor. Don't turn your back on me, she snapped. I kept folding. Stayed calm. Stayed quiet. That's when she shoved me. Hard. I stumbled sideways, my hip catching the corner of the granite counter Richard had surprised me with for our 20th anniversary. The impact sent pain shooting through my side, but it was my jaw that took the real hit. The sharp corner caught me right where my jawbone met my ear. I heard the crack before I felt it. Like stepping on a dry branch in the woods. The taste of blood filled my mouth, but it wasn't the pain that shocked me, it was what she said next. Now you know how to serve, Mom. About the house. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and fear. I sat in the hard plastic chair, holding an ice pack against my swelling jaw, while Amanda paced the waiting area like a concerned daughter-in-law should. But I knew better. Mrs. Coleman? The nurse called my name, and I followed her into the examination room. Amanda tried to come with me, but I held up my hand. I can handle this alone, I said through gritted teeth. Speaking hurt, but not as much as listening to Amanda's fake concern for the past hour. The doctor was young, maybe 35, with kind eyes and gentle hands. Dr. Martinez, according to his name tag. He reminded me of my grandson, same dark hair, same careful way of moving around older people. What happened here? He asked, tilting my chin to examine the damage. I could have told him the truth. Should have told him the truth. But 40 years of keeping family business private dies hard, even when family stops acting like family. I fell, I said. Hit the kitchen counter. Dr. Martinez nodded, but his eyes told me he'd heard that story before. He ordered x-rays, and 20 minutes later, we were looking at pictures of my broken jaw on a computer screen. You're going to need surgery, he said gently. The fracture is significant. We'll have to wire it shut for about 6 weeks while it heals. 6 weeks of not being able to speak properly. 6 weeks of liquid meals and careful movements. 6 weeks of being exactly what Amanda wanted me to be, helpless. Will she be able to live alone? Amanda had somehow convinced the nurse to let her into the room. Her voice was full of concerned authority, like she was already making decisions for me. That depends, Dr. Martinez said, looking at me instead of her. Do you have support at home? Someone to help with meals, medication? She'll be staying with us, Amanda said quickly. At least until she recovers. We couldn't possibly leave her alone like this. My hands tightened on the arms of the examination chair. Amanda's plan was working perfectly. Get me hurt, get me dependent, get me out of my house so she could move in and take over. But as the morphine they'd given me for pain started to kick in, I remembered something Amanda didn't know about the house. Something that would change everything. The night Richard died, he'd held my hand and whispered, "The papers are in the safety deposit box, baby. Everything's protected. Promise me you'll remember that." I'd been so lost in grief, I'd barely registered his words. But now, sitting in this sterile room with my jaw throbbing and Amanda hovering like a vulture, those words came back clear as Sunday morning church bells. Everything's protected. Mrs. Coleman? Dr. Martinez was talking to me, but his voice sounded far away. We're going to prep you for surgery now. Is there anyone you'd like us to call? I should have said my son David. Should have asked them to contact my neighbor Mrs. Henderson, who'd been bringing me casseroles since Richard passed. Should have reached out to someone who actually cared about me. Instead, I looked directly at Amanda and said, just her. She's all the family I need right now. Amanda's smile was triumphant, but she had no idea what she'd just signed up for. The surgery took 3 hours. When I woke up, my jaw was wired shut and Amanda was sitting beside my hospital bed, scrolling through her phone. She looked bored, like waiting for me to wake up was just another chore on her to-do list. How are you feeling, Mom? She asked when she noticed my eyes were open. I tried to answer, but only a mumbled sound came out. The wires made it impossible to open my mouth more than a few millimeters. I was going to be talking through my teeth for the next month and a half. The doctor says you'll need help with everything, Amanda continued, setting down her phone. Eating, medications, getting around. David and I have already moved some of your things to our guest room. They'd been in my house while I was unconscious. Going through my belongings, deciding what I needed and what I didn't. The violation of it made my chest tight with anger. But anger wasn't going to help me now. Smart was going to help me. Patient was going to help me. And remembering exactly what Richard had taught me about people who underestimate quiet women, that was going to help me most of all. I nodded, playing the grateful, helpless grandmother Amanda expected to see. David feels terrible about what happened, she said, and for the first time, there was something like genuine emotion in her voice. Guilt, maybe. Or fear that her husband might start asking questions about how his mother ended up with a broken jaw. I mumbled something that could have been accident, or okay, or thank you. Let her interpret it however she wanted. A nurse came in to check my vital signs and explain my medication schedule. Liquid nutrition 4 times a day. Pain medication every 6 hours. Follow-up appointments with Dr. Martinez every week. She'll be fine, the nurse told Amanda. Just needs time to heal. Time. That was the one thing Amanda thought she'd taken away from me. But she was wrong about that, just like she was wrong about everything else. As they wheeled me out of the hospital that afternoon, I caught my reflection in the elevator's polished steel doors. My face was swollen, my jaw held rigid by metal wires, and I looked every bit the fragile old woman Amanda needed me to be. But my eyes were clear. Alert. Planning. Richard had taught me something important during our 43 years together, something Amanda was about to learn the hard way: never mistake silence for surrender. The guest room at David and Amanda's house smelled like vanilla candles and disappointment. Everything was beige, the walls, the carpet, the bedspread they'd thrown over the single bed pushed against the window. It looked like a room where they put things they didn't want but couldn't quite throw away. Like me. I sat on the edge of that narrow bed, sipping liquid nutrition through a straw, and let my mind drift back to 1962. Birmingham, Alabama. I was 21 years old, working as a seamstress in a dress shop downtown, when Richard Coleman walked into my life like a summer storm you never see coming. He was 25, with calloused hands from working the oil fields in Oklahoma, and eyes the color of sweet tea. White as fresh cotton, which should have sent me running in the opposite direction. This was Alabama in 1962. Black women didn't date white men unless they wanted trouble, and I'd had enough trouble in my life already. But Richard was different. He didn't look through me like most white men did. He looked right at me, like I was the most important person in the room. When he asked me to coffee after buying his sister a dress for her wedding, I should have said no. Instead, I said yes. Our first real fight happened 6 months later, when his family found out about us. His father threatened to disown him. His mother cried like someone had died. His sister, the one whose wedding dress had brought him into my shop, crossed the street rather than speak to him. Maybe we should stop seeing each other, I told him that night, sitting on my tiny apartment steps while he paced the sidewalk like a caged animal. He stopped pacing and looked at me with those sweet tea eyes. You want me to choose between you and them? I nodded, afraid to hear his answer. Then I choose you, he said, sitting down beside me and pulling me close. I choose you every day for the rest of my life. His hands were rough from oil work, but gentle when they touched my face. When he kissed me that night, I tasted determination on his lips. He wasn't just choosing me for now. He was choosing the life we could build together, the children we might have, the years of standing strong against people who thought our love was wrong. We left Alabama 3 months later. Packed everything we owned into his beat-up Ford pickup and drove to Texas, where the oil boom was making opportunities for men willing to work hard. Richard found a job outside Fort Worth, and we rented a little house with a big backyard and dreams bigger than both of us combined. We're going to build something here, he told me on our wedding night, holding me close while Texas rain drummed against our bedroom window. Something that lasts. Something nobody can take away from us. He kept that promise. Every day for 43 years, he kept that promise. Richard worked oil rigs during the week and construction on weekends, saving every penny we could spare. I took in sewing, alterations, anything to add to our nest egg. By 1970, we'd saved enough to buy 5 acres of land outside town, and Richard started building our dream house with his own hands. Room by room, nail by nail, he built us a home. The kitchen came first, because I'd told him that's where families really live. Then the living room, with a stone fireplace where we'd spend winter evenings planning our future. 2 bedrooms for the children we hoped to have. A master bedroom with windows facing east, so I could wake up to sunrise every morning. David was born in 1972, and our daughter Lisa came 2 years later. Richard would come home from the rigs covered in oil and dirt, but he always cleaned up before holding the babies. He'd sit in that kitchen, still smelling like soap and aftershave, and feed them bottles while I cooked dinner. They're going to have everything we didn't, he'd whisper, watching our children sleep. Education, opportunities, choices. Nobody's ever going to make them feel small. The oil rights came in 1979. Richard's boss offered them to all the workers as a bonus, rights to whatever mineral wealth lay beneath our property. Most of the guys laughed it off, figured there was nothing under Texas dirt but more Texas dirt. But Richard was smarter than that. He'd been listening to the geologists who visited the work sites, paying attention to their soil samples and surveys. He knew something was down there. It's insurance, he told me the night we signed the papers. For you, for the kids, for their kids. Even if nothing comes of it now, these rights transfer to whoever owns the land. It's protection. Protection. That word meant everything to a man who'd spent his whole life fighting for what was his. The first oil check came in 1981. Not much, a few $100s. But Richard was smart with money, and smart about the future. He set up a trust, named me as the primary beneficiary, and made sure everything was legally bulletproof. "If something happens to me," he said, "you'll never have to depend on anybody else for anything." Now, sitting in Amanda's guest room with my jaw wired shut, I finally understood what Richard had been preparing me for all those years ago. He'd taught me something about dealing with bullies. Sometimes you have to let them think they're winning. The dining room table at David and Amanda's house had never held a family dinner that felt like family. Even before my jaw got broken, meals here were stiff affairs, Amanda showing off her cooking skills, David trying to keep conversation light, me feeling like a guest in my own son's life. Tonight felt different. Dangerous. Amanda had set the table with her good china, the wedding set with tiny roses around the edges that she only brought out for special occasions. The kind of special occasions where important decisions got made. "We need to discuss Mom's living situation," Amanda said, settling into her chair like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. David sat across from me, not meeting my eyes. My son, my baby boy who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms, who cried when his goldfish died, who called me every Sunday for 30 years, couldn't look at his own mother. I sipped liquid nutrition through my straw and waited. Sometimes the best strategy is letting other people show you exactly who they are. "The doctor says you'll need help for at least 6 weeks, Amanda continued, cutting her chicken into precise, delicate bites. "Maybe longer, depending on how well you heal." She made it sound like my broken jaw was a character flaw instead of the result of her shoving me into a granite counter. "Mom, we've been thinking," David finally spoke, his voice careful and rehearsed. "Maybe this is a good time to make some changes." Changes. There was that word again, dressed up in gentle tones but meaning the same thing it always meant when Amanda was involved. "What kind of changes?" I managed to mumble through the wires. Amanda reached across the table and patted my hand like I was a confused child. "We found a lovely place called Sunset Manor. It's an assisted living community about 20 minutes from here. You'd have your own apartment, 3 meals a day, activities, other people your age to socialize with." Other people your age. Like I was already dead and just didn't know it yet. "What about my house?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. David and Amanda exchanged a look. One of those married couple looks that speaks volumes without saying a word. "Well, that's the thing," David said, finally meeting my eyes. "The house is too much for you to maintain alone. Even before this happened, you were struggling with the upkeep." Struggling. Another lie. My house was in perfect condition because Richard had built it to last, and I'd been taking care of it properly for 40 years. But David hadn't visited often enough to know that. He'd been too busy with his own life, his own problems, his wife's demands on his time. "We think it would be best to sell it," Amanda said, her voice gentle but her eyes sharp as kitchen knives. "Use the money to pay for your care at Sunset Manor. That way, you won't have to worry about anything." Won't have to worry. Like worrying about my own home, my own independence, my own future was some kind of burden they were graciously lifting from my shoulders. I set down my nutrition drink and looked around the dining room. Family photos lined the buffet, David's graduation, his wedding, the grandchildren I barely got to see anymore. But no photos of Richard and me, no pictures of the life I'd built before Amanda decided it wasn't worth preserving. "Have you been to the house lately?" I asked David. He shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. "Mom, that's not the point." "Have you?" I pressed. "Not recently, but..." "3 months," I said quietly. 3 months since you've been inside the house your father built. 3 months since you've seen how well I've been taking care of everything." Amanda's jaw tightened. She didn't like the conversation turning away from her carefully planned presentation. "Mom, you fell and broke your jaw," David said, and I heard desperation in his voice. Like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. "What if it happens again? What if you have a heart attack or a stroke and nobody's there to help? What if? Fear dressed up as concern, but fear all the same. I thought about Richard, how he'd handled his own mother when she started getting older. He'd visited her every week, helped with groceries, fixed things around her house, but never once suggested she couldn't take care of herself. He'd honored her independence right up until the day she died peacefully in her own bedroom at 91 years old. Where would I go after Sunset Manor? I asked. Amanda's smile faltered. What do you mean? After the house money runs out. After I can't afford the assisted living anymore. Where do I go then? Silence stretched across the dining room like a spider web. Mom, let's not worry about that now, David said finally. Let's just focus on getting you healthy and settled somewhere safe. Safe. The word every person uses when they're taking away someone else's freedom. I reached for my nutrition drink and took a long, slow sip. The vanilla flavor was artificial, nothing like the real vanilla Richard used to bring me from his business trips. But it gave me time to think, time to plan. You've already been to see this place? I asked. Just to look, Amanda said quickly. Just to see what options are available. Options that didn't include asking me what I wanted. Options that started and ended with getting me out of my house so Amanda could move in and take over. When my son chose his wife's side over his mother's broken jaw, I knew the war had truly begun. But Amanda had made one critical mistake. She thought breaking my jaw had broken my spirit. She was about to learn the difference. The morning after our family gathering, Amanda arrived at my house carrying a leather briefcase that looked more expensive than my monthly grocery budget. She'd traded her usual designer heels for sensible flats, probably thinking it made her appear more trustworthy. How wrong she was. I brought the papers we discussed yesterday, she announced, settling herself at my kitchen table like she was doing me the greatest favor in the world. The same table where Richard and I had shared breakfast for 37 years. The same table where she'd knocked me unconscious just weeks ago. My jaw still ached when I spoke, the wire making every word feel foreign. What papers? She spread them across the oak surface like a dealer at a casino. The nursing home applications. The power of attorney forms. Everything we need to get you settled into Sunset Manor. Her manicured nails tapped against the wood. It's really for the best, Mom. You're not getting any younger. Mom. She'd never called me that before the incident. Now it rolled off her tongue like honey mixed with poison. I picked up the first document, squinting at the small print. My reading glasses sat on the counter, just out of comfortable reach. Amanda noticed my struggle and slid them over with a sympathetic smile that never reached her eyes. Take your time. I know legal language can be confusing at your age. At my age. As if turning 73 had suddenly made my brain soft as pudding. The nursing home brochure showed smiling elderly people playing bingo and tending small gardens. The monthly cost made my breath catch, nearly $4,000. How exactly am I supposed to pay for this? Well, that's the beautiful part. Amanda pulled out another set of papers. If we transfer the house into mine and David's names, we can sell it to cover your care. The property market is booming right now. Houses in this area are going for twice what they were worth 5 years ago. I set down the brochure and studied her face. She was trying so hard to look concerned, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. The same look she got when she spotted a designer purse on sale. And where would you and David live? Oh, we'd stay here, of course. Someone needs to maintain the property value. Plus, this house has so much sentimental value for David. It would break his heart to sell it to strangers. Sentimental value. Right. The only sentiment Amanda had toward this house was greed. I flipped through more pages, pretending to read carefully. Truth was, Richard had taught me to spot legal tricks back when we were first married. He'd been cheated by enough crooked contractors to know the importance of reading every line, every clause, every seemingly innocent phrase that could steal your future. This power of attorney form, I said slowly, it gives you control over all my finances? Just to make things easier. You won't have to worry about bills or investments or any of that complicated stuff. I'll handle everything. Handle everything. Including the bank account she didn't know about. Including the safety deposit box she'd never seen. Including the oil rights that made this property worth more than she could imagine. I remembered the night Richard first told me about those oil rights. We'd been married 3 years, and I was pregnant with David. Richard came home from the oil fields covered in dust and grinning like he'd struck gold. Which, in a way, he had. "Darling," he'd said, pulling me into his arms despite my protests about his dirty clothes, "I just signed the deal of a lifetime." His hands had rested on my growing belly as he explained how he negotiated mineral rights for this land as part of his employment package. "This baby's going to inherit more than just our love," he'd whispered against my neck. "He's going to inherit security." That night, we'd celebrated under the Texas stars, Richard's calloused hands gentle on my skin as we talked about our future. He'd been so proud of securing our family's fortune, so confident in his ability to provide. If he could see Amanda now, trying to steal what he'd worked so hard to build. "The lawyer explained everything to me yesterday," Amanda continued, mistaking my silence for confusion. "These forms are standard procedure for families dealing with elderly care transitions." Elderly care transitions. She made it sound like I was a package being shipped somewhere. I picked up the pen she'd brought, a heavy silver thing that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. "Where do I sign?" Her face lit up with triumph. "Right there on the highlighted lines. I've marked everything for you." As I moved the pen toward the paper, I noticed David standing in the doorway. My son looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he used to do as a child when he was caught in a lie. "Mom," he said quietly, "you don't have to sign anything today. You can take time to think about it." Amanda's head snapped toward him. "David, we discussed this. The sooner we get the paperwork filed, the sooner your mother can get the care she needs. But her jaw is barely healed. Maybe we should wait until she's feeling better. The waiting list at Sunset Manor is 6 months long. If we don't file these papers now, she might not get in at all." I watched this exchange with growing interest. My son was starting to question his wife's urgency. Good. The seed of doubt was already taking root. "You know what?" I set the pen down. "David's right. I should take some time to read through everything properly. These are important decisions." Amanda's smile faltered. "But the lawyer said." "The lawyer can wait." I gathered the papers into a neat stack. "I've managed my own affairs for 73 years. I think I can manage them for a few more days." She was so busy counting her chickens, she never noticed the fox in the henhouse. 3 days later, I drove to the First National Bank in downtown Fort Worth, my hands steady on the wheel despite the wire still holding my jaw together. The morning was already hot, the kind of Texas heat that makes the asphalt shimmer like water. Inside the bank's cool marble interior, I asked to access my safety deposit box. The one Amanda didn't know existed. The one David had forgotten about years ago. The one that held the real power in this family drama. Mrs. Rodriguez, the bank manager, had known Richard and me for 30 years. She helped me with the two-key system, her face professionally neutral as we descended to the vault. "Haven't seen you in a while, Mrs. Thompson," she said, sliding my box from its slot. "How are you holding up?" Word travels fast in small communities. She'd probably heard about my accident through the local grapevine. "I'm doing just fine," I replied, accepting the box with hands that barely trembled. Sometimes life surprises you with how strong you can be. The privacy room was small and windowless, just a table, 2 chairs, and fluorescent lighting that made everything look stark and official. I lifted the metal lid and smiled at what waited inside. Yellowed legal documents. Richard's careful handwriting on memo pads. Photographs of oil derricks from the boom years. And most importantly, the mineral rights agreements that Amanda's lawyer hadn't thought to research. I pulled out the main document, still crisp despite being 45 years old. The language was clear and legally binding: all mineral rights for this property, including oil, natural gas, and any other subsurface resources, belonged to the Thompson Family Trust, with me as the primary beneficiary and David as the secondary. The property wasn't just worth the house and 5 acres Amanda coveted. It was worth the oil reserves beneath it, reserves that had been quietly generating royalty payments for decades. Payments that went directly into a separate account Amanda knew nothing about. I remembered the night Richard set up this trust. We'd been married 15 years, and the oil boom was making some of our neighbors wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. Richard had come home from a meeting with lawyers and accountants, his shirt soaked with sweat but his eyes bright with excitement. "Sweetheart," he'd said, pulling me into our bedroom and closing the door, "we're about to become very rich people." He'd explained how the oil company wanted to drill on our land, how the royalty payments would set us up for life. That night, we'd celebrated with champagne and lovemaking that lasted until dawn, Richard whispering promises about the legacy we'd leave our son. "No one will ever be able to take this away from our family," he'd promised, his breath warm against my neck. Not ever. Now I understood why Amanda was so desperate to get her hands on this property. Someone had done their homework, probably researching property values and discovering the oil potential. But they'd made one crucial mistake: they assumed an elderly woman wouldn't know about her own assets. I pulled out the most recent royalty statement. The oil wells were still producing, still generating monthly payments of nearly $8,000. Money that had been accumulating in the trust account for years while I lived modestly on Richard's pension and Social Security. Amanda thought she was stealing a house worth maybe $300,000. She had no idea she was trying to steal a trust worth over $2 million. I photographed every document with my phone, a skill my granddaughter had taught me last Christmas. Then I made copies using the bank's machine, creating a complete record of everything Amanda's scheme depended on her not knowing. The drive home gave me time to think. Amanda would be expecting an answer about the nursing home papers soon. She'd probably start applying pressure, maybe even threatening to have me declared mentally incompetent if I refused to cooperate. Let her try. These documents in my purse proved I was far from incompetent. They proved I'd been managing complex financial assets longer than Amanda had been alive. Back at the house, I found her car in my driveway. Through the kitchen window, I could see her talking animatedly to David at the table, probably pushing him to convince me to sign her papers. I sat in my car for a moment, studying my home through the windshield. The house Richard built with his own hands. The garden where I'd grown tomatoes and roses for 40 years. The front porch where we'd watched thunderstorms and shared quiet evenings. Amanda could have all the designer clothes and expensive cars she wanted. But this house, this land, this legacy, it belonged to my family. The real family. The family Richard died protecting. I tucked the bank documents into my purse and walked toward the house, my spine straight and my purpose clear. Amanda was about to learn what happened when you underestimated a Thompson woman. As I reached for the front door handle, I could hear her voice through the wood. "David, your mother is being unreasonable. The longer we wait, the more confused she's going to become. We need to act now, before she starts forgetting things or making poor decisions." Poor decisions. Like trusting the woman who'd put me in the hospital. I opened the door and stepped into my own home, the documents in my purse worth more than Amanda's entire scheme combined. The oil rights were worth more than the house, the land, and Amanda's entire scheme combined. The next morning, I called Mr. Henderson, the lawyer who'd handled Richard's estate. His office was in an old brick building downtown, the kind of place that smelled like leather-bound books and decades of important decisions. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, rising from behind his mahogany desk as I entered. "I was so sorry to hear about your accident." Accident. Everyone kept calling it that, as if I'd simply fallen down the stairs instead of being pushed by my daughter-in-law. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. But I'm afraid that accident has revealed some concerning developments in my family." He gestured to the leather chair across from his desk, the same chair where Richard and I had signed our wills 20 years ago. The office hadn't changed much, same law books lining the walls, same photographs of oil derricks from Fort Worth's boom days, same sense of old-fashioned integrity that was becoming rare in modern business. I placed the safety deposit box documents on his desk and explained Amanda's scheme. Mr. Henderson listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making notes on his yellow legal pad. "She doesn't know about the mineral rights?" he asked when I finished. "She has no idea. I think someone told her the property was valuable, but they obviously didn't do complete research." Mr. Henderson smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from anyone in weeks. "Your husband was a smart man, Mrs. Thompson. He structured that trust to protect your interests no matter what happened. Can she force me into a nursing home? Can those papers she brought actually transfer my property? Not without your willing signature, and certainly not without proper legal representation for you. What she's attempting could be considered elder abuse, especially given the circumstances of your injury." Elder abuse. The term made me flinch, but it was accurate. Amanda had physically attacked me, then tried to manipulate me into signing away my assets while I was still recovering. "I need to know my options, Mr. Henderson. I won't let her steal what Richard worked so hard to build." He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "The trust gives you several advantages. First, the mineral rights cannot be transferred without trust approval, which means you and David must both agree. Second, the house itself is protected as your primary residence under Texas homestead laws. Third, any attempt to defraud you of these assets carries serious legal penalties." "What about David?" "He seems to be wavering, but he signed those nursing home papers Amanda brought." Signing papers and enforcing them are two different things. If David truly understood what his wife was trying to steal from both of you, he might change his perspective. I thought about my son, torn between loyalty to his mother and fear of his wife. Richard had raised him to be honest and fair, but 30 years of marriage to Amanda had worn down his backbone. "There's something else," I said. "I think Amanda is in serious financial trouble. She's been spending more than usual lately, buying expensive things, redecorating their house. I wonder if she's desperate for money." Mr. Henderson made another note. "That would explain the urgency. If she needs cash quickly, selling your property would solve her immediate problems. Can you investigate that? I can recommend a private investigator who specializes in financial backgrounds. If Amanda has debt problems, gambling issues, or other money troubles, we need to know about them." The idea of spying on my daughter-in-law should have bothered me more than it did. But after what she'd done to my jaw, after her scheme to steal my home, I felt no guilt about protecting myself. "Do it," I said. "I need to know what I'm really fighting." Mr. Henderson opened his desk drawer and pulled out a business card. "This is Sarah Martinez. She's discreet and thorough. I'll call her today." As I prepared to leave, he handed me another set of papers. "These are protective documents," he explained. "A new will, a medical power of attorney that specifically excludes Amanda, and a restraining order application in case she becomes more aggressive. You think she might get violent again? People who are desperate for money sometimes make poor choices. It's better to be prepared." I thought about Amanda's face when she'd pushed me, the cold calculation in her eyes. She'd hurt me once without hesitation. What would she do if she realized her plan was failing? "Mr. Henderson, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Did Richard ever mention being worried about David's marriage? About Amanda?" The older lawyer was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Your husband loved his son very much. But he was concerned about David's judgment regarding money and women. That's part of why he set up the trust the way he did, to protect David from his own generosity. Richard had seen this coming. Somehow, he'd known that David might need protection from his own wife. The trust wasn't just about my security, it was about preserving our family legacy from people who would destroy it for quick cash. Your husband would be proud of how you're handling this," Mr. Henderson said as I stood to leave. "He always said you were tougher than you looked." Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. I wasn't just a broken old woman being pushed around by a greedy daughter-in-law. I was Richard Thompson's widow, and I had resources Amanda couldn't imagine. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time since my accident, I knew I could win. When I returned home, Amanda was in my living room rearranging furniture. She'd moved Richard's favorite armchair away from the window and pushed the coffee table against the far wall. My wedding photos were stacked on the mantel like they were being prepared for storage. "Oh good, you're back," she said without looking up from the lamp she was repositioning. "I hope you don't mind, I was just thinking about how to make this space more appealing to potential buyers." Potential buyers. She was already planning to sell my house, and I hadn't even signed her papers yet. "Actually, I do mind." I set my purse down carefully, the legal documents from Mr. Henderson's office giving me newfound confidence. "This is still my home, Amanda." "Of course it is. I'm just trying to help maximize the property value. You want to get the best price possible for your care, don't you?" I watched her work, noting how familiar she seemed with my belongings. This wasn't spontaneous redecorating, she'd been planning this for a while. Probably walking through my home for months, cataloging everything, deciding what to keep and what to discard. "Have you had a chance to review those nursing home papers?" she asked, fluffing the couch cushions with professional efficiency. "I have. And I've decided to get a second opinion." Her hands stilled. "A second opinion?" "From my own lawyer. You understand, these are important decisions. I want to make sure I'm fully informed." Amanda turned to face me, her expression carefully neutral. "That's very wise. Though I hope you won't let anyone take advantage of your confusion right now. Sometimes lawyers see elderly clients as easy targets for unnecessary fees." Elderly clients. Easy targets. The irony was so thick I could taste it. "My lawyer has been handling my family's affairs for 20 years. I trust his judgment." "Well, of course. I just meant that some legal advice can be overly complicated. These nursing home transfers are really quite simple." I settled into Richard's armchair, the one she'd moved away from the window. It felt good to reclaim even this small piece of my space. "Actually, Amanda, I've been thinking about alternatives to the nursing home." "Alternatives?" "Home health care. Private nursing. There are options that would let me stay here while getting the medical support I need." She resumed fluffing cushions, but her movements were more aggressive now. "I'm not sure that's realistic. This house is so big, and you're getting more fragile every day. What if you fell? What if you had another accident?" "Another accident?" The threat was subtle but unmistakable. "I've lived in this house for 40 years. I know every floorboard, every light switch, every potential hazard. I'm probably safer here than anywhere else. But the isolation, Mom. What if something happened and no one was here to help? I have neighbors. I have friends from church. I have family who could check on me. David and I are so busy with work. We couldn't be here every day. I wouldn't expect you to be." Amanda sat down across from me, her voice taking on the patient tone she probably used with difficult customers at the boutique where she worked part-time. "Look, I know change is scary at your age. But Sunset Manor has activities, social opportunities, medical staff available 24 hours a day. You'd have friends your own age, people who understand what you're going through. People my own age." As if being 73 automatically meant I had nothing in common with anyone younger. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but I'm not ready to make such a big decision while I'm still recovering from my injury." "Your injury?" She repeated the words like they left a bad taste. "About that, I hope you're not dwelling on what happened. Accidents occur, especially when people aren't as steady as they used to be." "I remember exactly what happened, Amanda." Our eyes met across the coffee table, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw the calculation there, the cold assessment of how much I really remembered and how much trouble it might cause her. "Memory can be tricky after trauma," she said finally. "Sometimes our minds fill in details that weren't really there. My mind is perfectly clear." "Of course it is. I just meant that stress and medication can sometimes distort our recollection of events." She was already building her defense, creating doubt about my credibility. If I ever accused her of assault, she'd claim I was a confused old woman whose medication had affected my judgment. The doctor says my recovery is going very well, I replied. Both physically and mentally. Amanda stood up abruptly. Well, I should let you rest. All this decision-making must be exhausting. Actually, I feel more energetic than I have in weeks. That's wonderful. Just remember, the nursing home has a waiting list. We can't postpone this decision indefinitely. After she left, I sat in Richard's chair and looked around my rearranged living room. She'd been so confident, so sure that I'd cave to her pressure and sign those papers. Even now, she thought she was in control. What she didn't know was that I'd spent the afternoon setting legal traps of my own. The protective documents in my purse would prevent her from gaining any authority over my assets. The private investigator would expose whatever financial desperation was driving her scheme. And tomorrow, I had an appointment with the bank manager to discuss increasing security on all my accounts. She thought she was so clever with her lawyer tricks, but she forgot one crucial detail about my past. I'd been fighting battles longer than she'd been alive. The next week, Amanda's confidence reached new heights. She'd apparently decided that my hesitation about the nursing home was just temporary confusion, because she started acting like the house transfer was already complete. I came home from grocery shopping to find her in my kitchen with paint samples spread across the counter. Soft blues and sage greens, the kind of trendy colors featured in home decorating magazines. I thought you'd want to see these, she said, holding up a pale yellow swatch. This would look beautiful in the master bedroom. Very calming and therapeutic. Therapeutic for whom? Well, for the new owners eventually. But also for you, color therapy is very important for elderly wellness. Elderly wellness. She had an answer for everything. Amanda, I haven't agreed to sell the house. Of course not. But when you do decide to move to Sunset Manor, you'll want the property to show well. First impressions matter so much in real estate. She'd brought fabric samples too, expensive-looking materials in coordinating colors. Everything was carefully chosen to appeal to buyers with money, young professional couples who could afford the inflated prices she was counting on. I've also been thinking about the landscaping, she continued, moving to the window that overlooked my garden. Those rose bushes are so overgrown. And the vegetable garden takes up space that could be a nice lawn for children to play on. My rose bushes. The ones Richard had planted for our 10th anniversary. The vegetable garden where I still grew the tomatoes he'd loved so much. Those plants have been there for 30 years. Exactly. They're so outdated. Modern buyers want low-maintenance landscapes, not all these old-fashioned gardens that require constant work. I watched her dismiss decades of my life's work with casual indifference. To her, my roses were just obstacles to profit. My vegetables were wasted space that could generate more money. I've already called a landscaping company for estimates, she added. They can clear everything out in a weekend. You called landscapers without asking me? I was just getting preliminary information. But they said the property would show much better with a clean, modern look. The audacity took my breath away. She was planning renovations to my house before she even legally owned it. Making decisions about my garden while I was still living here. Over the next few days, her behavior became even bolder. I found her measuring windows for new curtains. She brought friends over to tour her new place, talking about renovation plans while I sat in my own living room, apparently invisible. The kitchen will need complete updating, she told Mrs. Patterson from her book club. These cabinets are so dated. I'm thinking granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, maybe knock out this wall to create an open concept. Mrs. Patterson glanced at me uncomfortably. But isn't this still? Oh, Mom's going to love her new apartment at the senior center, Amanda interrupted smoothly. Much easier to maintain than this big old house. Senior center. Now it was a senior center instead of Sunset Manor. The story kept changing depending on her audience. I excused myself and went to my bedroom, but I could still hear them talking about paint colors and flooring options. Amanda was describing my home like it was an episode of a house flipping show, calculating profit margins and renovation timelines. That evening, I found expensive furniture catalogs scattered on my coffee table. Amanda had marked pages with sticky notes: new dining room sets, modern living room furniture, contemporary bedroom suites. Everything chosen to erase any trace of the life Richard and I had built here. "I thought you might enjoy looking at these," she said when she found me flipping through one. "It's never too early to start planning your new apartment decor. These prices are outrageous. A dining table for $3,000? Well, you'd only need a small table. Maybe just 2 chairs. It's not like you'll be entertaining large groups. 2 chairs." In her vision of my future, I'd be so isolated that I'd never need to seat more than one guest. "Besides," she continued, "after we sell this house, money won't be an issue. You'll be able to afford nice things for your new place." I studied her face as she talked about my money like it was already hers. The greed was so naked now, so undisguised. She'd stopped pretending this was about my welfare and started treating it like a business transaction. "Amanda, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you and David having financial problems?" The question caught her off guard. For just a second, her confident mask slipped and I saw something else: panic, maybe, or desperation. "What makes you ask that?" "All this urgency about selling the house. All these expensive renovation plans. It seems like you need money quickly." "We're fine," she said, but her voice was sharper now. "We're just trying to plan ahead, make sure everything is handled properly. Because if you needed help with something, you could just ask. Families should be honest with each other. We don't need help. We're trying to help you." But I could see the lie in her eyes. Something was driving this desperate scheme, some financial pressure that made stealing my home seem worth the risk of destroying our family. Every paint swatch she chose was another nail in her own coffin. Late that evening, David knocked on my door. He stood on the porch shifting his weight like he used to do as a child when he'd broken something and needed to confess. "Mom, can we talk?" I led him into the kitchen, the same room where this whole nightmare had started. He sat at the table looking older than his 48 years, dark circles under his eyes and a tension in his shoulders that reminded me of his father during the oil field layoffs. "I've been thinking about what happened to you," he said quietly. "About your accident." "It wasn't an accident, David." He flinched at the direct words. "Amanda says you might be confused about the details. That the medication." "I'm not confused. Your wife pushed me. I hit the corner of that counter." I pointed to the spot where my blood had stained the granite. "She stood over me while I was unconscious and didn't call for help until she was sure I was badly hurt." David stared at the counter, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Why would she do that? You tell me. You know her better than I do." He was quiet for a long time, working through thoughts he'd probably been avoiding for weeks. Finally, he spoke. "She's been different lately. More anxious about money, more focused on this house. I thought it was just normal concern for your future." "What kind of concerns?" "She keeps talking about how much this place is worth. How the property values in this area have increased. She's researched nursing homes, elder care costs, all of it." I poured him coffee, the same mug he'd used as a teenager. "David, are you and Amanda having money troubles?" He looked up sharply. "Why does everyone keep asking me that?" "Because your wife is acting like someone who desperately needs cash. We're not rich, but we're getting by. Amanda likes nice things, but that's not unusual." "What about her spending? Has it increased lately?" David rubbed his forehead. "She's been buying more clothes, redecorating our house. But she says it's important for her work image." "What about debts? Credit cards, loans, anything like that?" "I don't really handle our finances. Amanda takes care of all that." This was news to me. Richard had taught David to be responsible with money, to understand every aspect of the family finances. The fact that he'd handed control to Amanda suggested either complete trust or willful ignorance. "Son, I think you need to look at your financial situation more carefully." "Why? What are you suggesting?" I chose my words carefully. "I'm suggesting that Amanda's sudden interest in my property might have nothing to do with my care and everything to do with your bank accounts." David stared into his coffee. "You really think she would hurt you for money?" "I think desperate people do desperate things. And I think your wife is more desperate than either of us realized." We sat in silence, the kitchen clock ticking loudly. Outside, the cicadas were starting their evening chorus, the same sound that had lulled me to sleep for 40 years in this house. "There's something else," David said eventually. "I found some papers in Amanda's purse. Credit card statements, store receipts." The amounts were significant. How significant? Thousands of dollars. Designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments. Things we definitely can't afford on our salaries. My heart sank. This was worse than I'd suspected. Amanda wasn't just greedy, she was in serious debt and saw my property as her salvation. "David, I need to show you something." I retrieved the trust documents from my purse and spread them on the table. David's eyes widened as he recognized his father's handwriting, the official seals, the legal language that protected our family's assets. "Dad set up a trust?" "Your father was a smart man. He knew that sometimes families need protection from their own members." David read through the mineral rights agreement, the oil royalty statements, the trust provisions that Amanda's scheme depended on him not knowing about. "Mom, this is worth millions. It's worth your future and your children's future. It's what your father worked his whole life to build. And Amanda wants to steal all of it for nursing home fees that would barely cover a fraction of what's here. She doesn't know about the trust. She thinks she's stealing a house. She has no idea she's trying to steal your inheritance." David's hands shook as he set down the papers. "I can't believe she would do this. I can't believe I almost let her." "You didn't know. She made sure of that. But I should have questioned things more. I should have protected you better." I reached across the table and took his hand, the same hand I'd held when he was learning to walk, when he was scared of thunderstorms, when he'd cried over his first heartbreak. "You're protecting me now. That's what matters. What do we do?" "We stop her. Legally, completely, and permanently." David nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I saw my son instead of Amanda's husband. The boy Richard had raised to be honest and strong was still there underneath years of manipulation and control. When he asked about his father's papers, I knew the seed of doubt was planted. Now it was time to let it grow. Sarah Martinez was exactly what I expected from a private investigator: sharp eyes, no-nonsense handshake, and the ability to blend into any crowd. We met at a small diner on the outskirts of town, far from anywhere Amanda might recognize me. "Mr. Henderson filled me in on the basics," Sarah said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "But what I found goes deeper than simple overspending." I opened the folder and nearly choked on my coffee. Credit card statements showing balances in the tens of thousands. Store receipts for luxury items that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Bank overdraft notices. Late payment warnings. "How much debt are we talking about?" I asked. "Combined credit cards, personal loans, and store accounts?" "Nearly $70,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. David's salary at the insurance company was decent, but not enough to support this kind of spending. Amanda's part-time work at the boutique barely covered her own expenses. "There's more," Sarah continued, pulling out another stack of papers. "She's been gambling. Online poker sites, casino trips to Louisiana, scratch-off tickets. The bank statements show consistent withdrawals from ATMs at gambling locations." I stared at the evidence spread before me. Amanda wasn't just a greedy woman who wanted my house, she was addicted to spending and gambling, trapped in a cycle that was destroying her family's financial security. Does David know about any of this? Based on what I could determine, she's been hiding everything from him. Separate accounts, mail forwarded to a P.O. box, bills paid from her personal checking account to keep them off the joint statements he sees. The level of deception was staggering. Amanda had been living a double life, accumulating debt while maintaining the appearance of financial stability. My son had no idea his wife was driving them toward bankruptcy. How long has this been going on? The earliest records I could trace go back 3 years. But the spending has accelerated dramatically in the last 6 months. 3 years. She'd been lying to my son for 3 years, building a mountain of debt while plotting to steal my property to pay for her addiction. There's something else you should know, Sarah said, her voice dropping lower. She's been researching your property extensively. Real estate websites, property tax records, even oil production reports for this area. She knows exactly how much your land is worth. My blood ran cold. She knows about the oil rights? She knows the area has active wells, but I don't think she knows about your specific trust arrangements. Her research focused on property values and selling processes. That explained the urgency, the nursing home scheme, the pressure to sign papers quickly. Amanda had discovered my land was valuable, but not how valuable or how it was legally protected. What about the assault? I asked. Any evidence of planning? Sarah's expression darkened. I interviewed some neighbors, people who might have witnessed interactions between you and Amanda. Mrs. Chen from across the street saw Amanda arguing with you in your driveway the week before your injury. She said Amanda looked angry enough to do something violent. Did she report it? No, she thought it was just family drama. But she's willing to testify about Amanda's aggressive behavior if needed. The evidence was building into a clear picture of premeditation. Amanda hadn't just lost her temper and pushed me, she'd been planning something for weeks, maybe months. One more thing, Sarah said, pulling out a photograph. This was taken at the casino in Shreveport last weekend. The photo showed Amanda at a poker table, chips stacked in front of her, a drink in her hand. She looked relaxed, confident, nothing like the concerned daughter-in-law who was supposedly worried about my care. She told David she was visiting her sister, I said. Her sister lives in Dallas and was working that weekend. I checked. Another lie. Another deception in the web Amanda had built around my family. I gathered the papers back into the folder, my hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. This evidence changed everything. Amanda wasn't just trying to steal my property, she was a gambling addict who'd been lying to my son for years. What's your recommendation? I asked Sarah. Legally, you have enough evidence to file charges for assault and attempted fraud. Personally, I think you should protect yourself and your family before she gets more desperate. More desperate? People with gambling addictions don't stop when they hit bottom. They keep digging. If her plan to get your house fails, she might try something more extreme. The thought chilled me. I'd already underestimated Amanda's capacity for violence once. I couldn't afford to make that mistake again. I want copies of everything, I said. And I want you to keep investigating. If she's hiding this much from David, there might be more we don't know about. Sarah nodded. I'll stay on it. But Mrs. Thompson, be careful. Desperate people with nothing to lose can be dangerous. Driving home, I thought about the woman who'd married my son 15 years ago. The Amanda I'd welcomed into our family had been charming, ambitious, full of plans for the future. When had she become this person who would assault an elderly woman for money? Or had she always been this person, just better at hiding it? The truth about Amanda's shopping addiction was worse than any of us imagined. I'd been planning this moment for days, choosing the time and place carefully. 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, when David was at work and Amanda thought I was at my weekly doctor's appointment. Instead, I was standing in my own kitchen, waiting for her to arrive for what she thought was another pressure session about the nursing home papers. The sound of her key in my front door, a key I'd never given her but she'd somehow acquired, announced her arrival. She called out as she entered, her voice artificially cheerful. Mom? I brought some more brochures for Sunset Manor. They have an opening coming up next month. I stayed silent, letting her come to me. She found me sitting at the kitchen table, the table where this whole nightmare had started, where she'd pushed me into unconsciousness weeks ago. "Oh good, you're home early." She set her purse down and pulled out a chair across from me. "I was hoping we could talk about timing. The manor needs a commitment by Friday if you want that room." "Sit down, Amanda." Something in my voice made her freeze. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. "Is everything okay?" "Sit down." She lowered herself into the chair, her designer handbag clutched protectively in her lap. "You sound upset. Are you feeling all right?" I pulled out Sarah Martinez's folder and placed it on the table between us. Amanda's eyes fixed on it like it was a snake coiled to strike. "I know about the gambling," I said quietly. Her face went completely white. "I don't know what you're talking about." $70,000 in debt. 3 years of lying to my son. Casino trips to Louisiana while telling David you were visiting your sister. Amanda's hand started shaking. "Who told you that? Who's been spreading lies about me?" "These aren't lies." I opened the folder and spread the credit card statements across the table. "These are facts. Bank statements. Photographs of you at poker tables." She stared at the evidence of her secret life, her breathing becoming shallow and quick. "You had me investigated? You spied on me?" "I protected myself from a woman who assaulted me and then tried to steal my home." "I didn't assault you. You fell. You're old and unsteady and you fell. I have a witness who saw you arguing with me the week before my fall. Mrs. Chen from across the street. She said you looked angry enough to hurt someone." Amanda's mask was slipping completely now. Gone was the concerned daughter-in-law, replaced by something desperate and cornered. "You can't prove anything," she said, but her voice cracked. "It's your word against mine, and you're an elderly woman with a head injury. Is that your defense? That I'm too old and confused to be believed? I'm saying that stress and medication can affect memory. Everyone knows that." I pulled out more papers, the trust documents, the oil rights agreements, the bank statements showing my real assets. Amanda's eyes widened as she realized what she was looking at. "You knew about the oil rights, didn't you?" I asked. "You researched my property, found out it was valuable, and decided to steal it. I was trying to help you plan for your care. You were trying to pay off your gambling debts with my family's fortune." Amanda stood up abruptly, pacing to the window where she'd planned to tear out my rose garden. "You don't understand. I made some mistakes, but I can fix this. I just need time." "Time to what? Accumulate more debt? Lie to David for another 3 years? David doesn't need to know about this. No one needs to know. We can work something out between us." The audacity was breathtaking. Even caught red-handed, she was still trying to negotiate, still scheming for a way to get what she wanted. "What exactly are you proposing?" Amanda turned back to me, and I saw a flash of the calculation that had always lurked behind her friendly facade. "A loan. From your oil money. Just enough to clear my debts and start fresh. I'll pay you back with interest." "With what money?" "Your part-time boutique salary. I'll get a better job. I'll stop gambling. I just need one chance to make this right." "You had a chance to make it right before you put me in the hospital." She flinched at the direct accusation. "That was an accident. I was upset, we were arguing, I didn't mean to push you so hard." Finally. An admission. "So you admit you pushed me?" Amanda realized her mistake immediately. We were both emotional. Things got out of hand. "You assaulted me because I wouldn't give you access to my money." "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like. Explain to me how a family disagreement ends with a 73-year-old woman unconscious on her kitchen floor." Amanda sank back into her chair, her head in her hands. When she looked up, tears were streaming down her face, but I felt no sympathy. I'd cried plenty of tears when my jaw was wired shut. "I'm in trouble," she whispered. "Real trouble. These people I owe money to, they're not patient like banks. They've been making threats." "What kind of threats?" "They know where I work, where David works, where we live. They said they'd hurt him if I don't pay them back soon." This was a new piece of the puzzle. Amanda wasn't just dealing with credit card companies, she owed money to dangerous people. "How much do you owe these people specifically?" $20,000. "But it grows every week. I can't pay." When I told her I knew about her debts, her mask finally slipped completely. The family meeting I'd called for Sunday dinner was nothing like the one Amanda had orchestrated weeks ago. This time, I controlled the agenda, the guest list, and most importantly, the information. David sat beside me at the head of the table, the trust documents spread in front of him like armor. Mr. Henderson occupied the chair to my right, his briefcase open and ready. Amanda sat across from us, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, her usual confidence completely gone. "I've asked Mr. Henderson here today to clarify some legal matters," I began, my voice steady despite the wire still holding my jaw. "Specifically, regarding the property transfer papers you've been so eager for me to sign." Amanda's hands were folded tightly in her lap. She'd barely spoken since arriving, probably trying to figure out how much David knew about our kitchen confrontation 2 days ago. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Henderson said, opening his briefcase, "let's start with the fundamental issue. These nursing home documents your daughter-in-law prepared contain several legal problems." He pulled out Amanda's papers and set them beside the trust documents. The contrast was striking, her hastily prepared forms versus decades of careful legal planning. First, the power of attorney form grants Amanda control over assets she has no legal right to manage. The Thompson family trust specifically excludes non-blood relatives from any decision-making authority. Amanda finally spoke. "But David is a blood relative. He could make those decisions." "David could participate in trust decisions," Mr. Henderson agreed. "But only with his mother's consent and only for decisions that benefit the trust beneficiaries. Transferring trust assets to pay for gambling debts would violate his fiduciary duty." The word gambling hit the table like a physical blow. David turned to stare at his wife, his face a mixture of shock and betrayal. "Gambling debts?" he asked quietly. Mr. Henderson pulled out Sarah's investigation folder. "Your wife has accumulated approximately $70,000 in debt over the past 3 years. Credit cards, personal loans, and money owed to what appeared to be illegal gambling operations." David's hands shook as he reached for the folder. "Amanda, is this true?" She couldn't meet his eyes. "I can explain everything." $70,000? David's voice cracked. "How is that even possible? I made some mistakes, but I was going to fix it. The house sale would have covered everything." "The house sale that required putting my mother in a nursing home against her will?" Amanda looked up sharply. "She needs care. Anyone can see that." "What she needs," Mr. Henderson interrupted, "is protection from people trying to defraud her. Which brings us to the second legal problem with these documents." He pulled out a police report I hadn't seen before. The assault that put Mrs. Thompson in the hospital wasn't a simple domestic dispute. Given the financial motive we've uncovered, this constitutes attempted elder abuse under Texas law. Elder abuse? David stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. "Amanda, did you hurt my mother?" The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Amanda's tears were flowing freely now, but they looked more like self-pity than genuine remorse. "We were arguing," she finally whispered. "About money, about the house, about everything. I didn't mean to push her so hard." "You pushed her?" She was being unreasonable. Refusing to listen to logic. "I just wanted her to understand that selling the house was the best solution for everyone." "The best solution for paying your gambling debts," David said coldly. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "There's one more document Mrs. Thompson wanted you to see, David." He pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the table. David read it quickly, his expression changing from anger to amazement. Mom, this says the trust is worth over $2 million. Your father was very thorough in his planning. The mineral rights alone generate enough monthly income to pay for any care I might need, with plenty left over for your children's education. Amanda's head snapped up. $2 million. Money that would have passed to David and his children when I die, I said. Money you tried to steal by forcing me into a nursing home I didn't need. I didn't know about the trust, Amanda protested. I thought the house was all you had. You researched oil production in this area, Mr. Henderson said. You knew the land was valuable. But not how valuable. If I had known, you would have tried to steal more. David's voice was ice cold. Amanda realized how that sounded. No, I mean I would have found another solution. I never would have asked you to sell if I'd known about the trust income. You never asked, I pointed out. You tried to trick me into signing papers while I was recovering from injuries you caused. Mr. Henderson reached into his briefcase one more time. Which brings us to the final matter. Mrs. Thompson, here are the documents you requested. He handed me a restraining order, already signed by a judge. This legally prohibits Amanda from entering your property, contacting you directly, or attempting to influence any decisions regarding your assets. Amanda stared at the legal papers like they were a death sentence. You're banning me from the family? I'm protecting myself from someone who has already proven she's willing to use violence to get what she wants. The oil rights weren't the only surprise I had waiting for her. The police arrived exactly at noon, just as I'd arranged with Detective Morrison. I watched from my living room window as the squad car pulled into my driveway, the same driveway where Amanda had parked her car so confidently for months while planning my downfall. David was at work, spared from witnessing his wife's arrest. I'd timed this carefully. He'd suffered enough humiliation without having to watch Amanda led away in handcuffs in front of the neighbors. The doorbell rang twice before Amanda answered. I could hear her voice from where I sat, artificially bright and welcoming. Officers, is there some kind of problem? Mrs. Amanda Thompson? Detective Morrison's voice was professional and calm. Yes, that's me. Ma'am, you're under arrest for elder abuse and attempted fraud. You have the right to remain silent. The Miranda warning drifted through the house like a death knell for Amanda's schemes. I heard her protests, her claims that this was all a misunderstanding, her desperate attempts to charm her way out of handcuffs. There's been a mistake, she kept saying. I was trying to help my mother-in-law. I would never hurt her. But the evidence was overwhelming. The assault, witnessed and documented. The fraudulent nursing home papers. The financial investigation showing her gambling debts and desperate need for money. The premeditated research into my property values. I didn't go outside to watch them lead her away. Some victories don't require public display. Instead, I sat in Richard's chair and listened to the car doors slam, the engine start, the sound of justice finally being served. Mrs. Chen from across the street knocked on my door 20 minutes later, her face flushed with curiosity and concern. Dear, are you all right? I saw the police car. I'm fine, Mrs. Chen. Just some legal matters getting sorted out. That woman who's been coming around, she looked so angry when they put her in the car. I hope she wasn't bothering you. I thought about the weeks of fear, the pain in my jaw, the sleepless nights worrying about losing my home. She won't be bothering anyone anymore. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. I called Mr. Henderson to confirm the arrest had gone smoothly. I called David at his office to let him know what had happened, hearing the relief in his voice mixed with the shame of realizing how blind he'd been to his wife's true nature. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what she was doing. I should have protected you better. You couldn't have known the extent of her deception. She fooled me for 15 years too. What happens now? Now you start over. You rebuild your life without someone who was willing to hurt your family for gambling money. That evening, David came by with pizza and a bottle of wine. We sat in my kitchen, the scene of so much recent trauma, and talked honestly for the first time in years. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, he said, refilling my glass. The secretiveness about money, the expensive clothes she couldn't afford, the way she always changed the subject when I asked about our finances. Addiction makes people very good liars. She probably convinced herself she was protecting you by hiding the truth. Was she always like this? Even when we first got married? I considered the question carefully. I think she always had expensive tastes and poor impulse control. But the gambling addiction probably developed over time, and addiction changes people. It makes them capable of things they never imagined doing. Like hurting you. Like hurting anyone who stands between them and their next fix. David was quiet for a long moment, staring at his wine. I'm going to file for divorce. That's your decision to make. But I think it's the right one. What about the debt? Am I responsible for what she owes? Mr. Henderson says Texas law protects you from gambling debts incurred without your knowledge. You'll probably need to file for bankruptcy to clear the credit cards, but you can start fresh. And the people she owes money to? The dangerous ones? That's Amanda's problem now. She made those deals, she can face the consequences. We talked until nearly midnight, working through 15 years of marriage that had been built on lies and manipulation. David had lost his wife, but in a way, he was also being freed from a prison he hadn't even realized he was in. As he prepared to leave, he hugged me tighter than he had since he was a child. Thank you for fighting back, he whispered. Thank you for being stronger than she thought you were. After he left, I walked through my house, truly my house again, and thought about the journey from victim to victor. Amanda had seen an elderly woman and assumed weakness. She'd calculated the value of my property but missed the value of my strength. The house was quiet now, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for months. No more footsteps measuring rooms for renovation. No more schemes whispered over paint samples. No more threats disguised as family concern. Tomorrow, I would start healing, not just my jaw, but my sense of security in my own home. I would tend my roses, harvest my vegetables, and live without fear of the woman who'd tried to steal my life. But the biggest shock was still coming, and it involved my son's future. 6 months later, I was standing in my kitchen making coffee when David knocked on my door. The morning sun streamed through clean windows, highlighting the roses Richard had planted, now blooming more beautifully than they had in years. Morning, Mom. David kissed my cheek and accepted the mug I offered him. The wire had been removed from my jaw months ago, and I could smile properly for the first time since Amanda's assault. How did the divorce hearing go yesterday? Final papers signed. It's officially over. He sat at the table, looking older but somehow lighter than he had during his marriage. The judge awarded her half of our joint assets, which amounts to about $3,000 after paying off the legitimate debts. And her gambling debts? Those are hers alone. The court ruled that since she hid them from me, I have no responsibility for paying them back. I poured my own coffee and joined him at the table. Any word on her criminal case? Her lawyer worked out a plea deal. 2 years probation, community service, and she has to pay restitution for your medical bills. Plus she's banned from contacting either of us. That's lighter than I expected. The prosecutor said first-time elder abuse charges rarely get prison time unless there's serious injury involved. But she'll have a felony on her record, which will make finding decent work difficult. I thought about Amanda somewhere in the city, probably staying with friends or family, trying to rebuild her life with a criminal record and crushing debt. I should have felt satisfaction, but mostly I just felt tired. Winning had taken so much energy. David, I want to talk to you about something important. He looked up from his coffee, instantly alert. What is it? I've been thinking about the trust, about what your father intended when he set it up. Mom, if this is about me inheriting early, I don't need. It's not about money. I pulled out papers I've been working on with Mr. Henderson for weeks. It's about family. The documents outline my plan to restructure part of the trust, creating educational funds for David's future children and establishing a foundation for elder care advocacy. Richard's oil money would continue protecting our family, but it would also help other elderly people avoid what I'd experienced. You want to start a foundation? I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other families. Elder abuse is more common than people realize, and the victims are often isolated and afraid to speak up. David studied the papers, his expression shifting from surprise to pride. Dad would love this. Your father always said money was just a tool. The question is what you build with it. We spent the morning reviewing the foundation plans, discussing how to identify at-risk elderly people, provide legal resources, and educate families about financial abuse. It felt good to channel the anger and fear from Amanda's scheme into something positive. Around noon, David helped me with yard work, pruning the roses and weeding the vegetable garden Amanda had wanted to destroy. The physical labor was therapeutic, a way of reclaiming my space and my peace of mind. Mom, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever regret fighting back? Would it have been easier to just give her what she wanted? I paused in my weeding, considering the question seriously. Easier, maybe. But wrong. Your father didn't work himself to exhaustion in those oil fields so Amanda could gamble away our family's security. He built this legacy to protect us, and I had a duty to protect it. Even when it meant family conflict? Especially then. Real family protects each other. People who would hurt you for money aren't family, they're just people who happen to share your last name. That afternoon, we drove to the cemetery where Richard was buried. I'd avoided visiting during the worst of Amanda's harassment, but now I felt ready to face his headstone and tell him how the story ended. We protected what you built, I whispered, placing fresh roses on his grave. Our son is free, our legacy is secure, and the woman who tried to steal it all is gone. The wind rustled through the oak trees, and for a moment I could almost feel Richard's approval, his pride in how I'd found my strength when I needed it most. On the drive home, David was unusually quiet. Finally, he spoke. I met someone. Oh. Her name is Sarah. She's a teacher at the elementary school. We've been talking for a few weeks. And I think you'd like her. She's honest, kind, completely different from. He trailed off, not wanting to speak Amanda's name. I'd love to meet her. When you're ready. Maybe next Sunday. I could bring her for dinner. I'll make pot roast. Your father's recipe. We drove the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, both of us thinking about new beginnings and second chances. The house came into view as we rounded the corner, solid and unchanged, a testament to Richard's craftsmanship and our family's endurance. That evening, I sat in Richard's chair and looked around my living room. The furniture was back in its proper places. My wedding photos were restored to the mantel. The paint samples and renovation plans were gone, replaced by the comfortable clutter of a life lived fully. Amanda had seen my age and assumed weakness. She'd calculated my vulnerability but missed my resilience. She'd plotted to steal my future but ended up losing her own. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from letting others underestimate you. I was 73 years old, my jaw had healed completely, and I was still standing in my own home, surrounded by the life Richard and I had built together. That was victory enough.